Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's live stream. If you are in business for a few years, then you know that over the last years, especially the topics direct to consumer or e-commerce are really hot topics. Not to say they are treated as kind of holy grail of business. And therefore, what we want to have a look at today is, can e-commerce, can direct-to-consumer actually fulfill the promises it's making or it has made? And try to answer the question, why are so many direct-to-consumer or so many e-commerce companies actually failing? But before we do that, let me know if you can see and hear me loud and clear, if all the tech is working. And as usual, we have a 10-20 second delay during these live streams to minimize that. What usually helps is when you set the speed in your play bar to 1.5. That usually causes, therefore, so that you catch up and actually are in the live stream. So let's jump right into it. Why do so many e-commerce companies fail? I want to look at a few popular examples, and I'm more than interested to hear your thoughts or maybe the examples you might have. But I want to pick a few that you might have heard of over the last years. Maybe you saw their marketing, maybe you own a product of them, whatever it might be. And one that you might heard of is Casper, a mattress company. I think they were founded 2010, 2012, something around these dates. And one of the poster childs of direct-to-consumer brands over the last years. And Casper is one of the e-commerce direct-to-consumer companies that is losing money every month. Then a company that especially became well-known or famous during the pandemic, where more and more people had to stay at home or couldn't go to the gym, and therefore bought or rented or had a subscription model for home equipment. That was basically the idea or the business model of Peloton. And they also are losing money every month, and I think they also are almost bankrupt, and maybe they got taken private and got taken off the market. They also don't look too good right now. And then another company, also retail and direct to consumer, Manscaped. A lot of these ads are popping up over the internet, YouTube, podcasts, and so on over the last years. And also the same story here. They announced a loss of more than $300 million last year in 2021. So, and these are only the most famous ones that you know and heard of. So the question then becomes, okay, what are the reasons? Why are there, or if e-commerce, or if the idea or the premise of direct-to-consumer is so good or is so promising, why are there so many companies failing, or why are there so few companies succeeding? And that's what I want to explore a little bit today and share some of my experience that I had over the last years. And as always, if you have any questions, use the chat function over there or there, depending on which social media platform you're watching right now. So in my experience, what makes a really big difference in the outcome or in the success or in the overall structure of the business is the question, are we talking about a VC-funded startup, or generally speaking, a funded company that is fueled by external money? Or are we talking about a bootstrapped, already existing retail company? And when I mean bootstrap, I mean, in a conservative sense, meaning, growing organically, being profitable and growing on a normal, healthy pace and rate without too much external capital or too much leverage, if at all. And usually also with an existing customer and therefore revenue base. So these are usually the two different kind of companies that I had contact with or that I meet in my day-to-day work, and I want to focus a little bit on these two archetypes maybe. Because at the end of the day, as far as I can tell, it comes down to a few simple principles or a few basic principles, mainly customer acquisition costs. For example, depending on your product or the industry you are in, might have different sales channels or different ways to acquire new customers or to sell your products. For example, maybe you have your physical products in a classical retail environment, in a retail store, in a mall, and are selling it through a third-party vendor, for example. Or maybe you have a sales team that is selling the product directly to the end consumer, to the customer. Or maybe you are selling exclusively online through your website, through your app, or through other online sales channels. And therefore, depending on what or about what area, what channel we're talking about here, that might be a big difference on the one hand, on the volume, on the overall marketing and sales process, but also at the end of the day on the customer acquisition cost side of things. So I want to keep that in mind, or that's one of the main focus points that we have to focus on if we want to actually determine, okay, what are the reasons why a company is successful or not, or what are the metrics, data points that we can actually use to make these predictions. And then, of course, on the other side, the customer lifetime value, or the average order value, however you want to phrase that. At the end of the day, it comes down to the question, all right, how much value is, or how value is a customer for you? And of course, then that depends on the product that you are selling. When you're selling a phone, in that case, is a smartphone here that costs something between 500 and $1,000 usually, and probably the average consumer buys a new smartphone all 2-3 years on average in the Western hemisphere, at least. Then we have another product like, for example, razor blades over here, where you replace the product or the blades in that example every week or every month, or on a much more frequent basis. On the other hand, of course, the price per little unit is much smaller than a smartphone. Or we're talking about way more expensive product like a car, which most people usually buy every few years, maybe only every few decades. And of course, talking about a way higher price point here. And depending how the whole business model is structured, that can affect the customer lifetime value massively, and therefore can determine the success of a company massively. For example, when we're talking about a company like Dollar Shave Club, that kind of revolutionized and changed the shaving industry, if you want to, by offering that kind of subscription model that to that point was only kind of known in the software industry. Now they introduced that into the physical product world and offered a subscription model for razor blades. We've seen same developments in the car industry, where we probably more switching to a car sharing environment. Driverless cars will also completely change that industry and technology and so on. And therefore I think it's very important that every business owner, every decision maker operator needs to understand, okay, where's actually the value proposition, where's the value created, and how can you increase the customer lifetime value of your company. Because otherwise, when we look at the increasing customer acquisition costs through the bank, especially when we're talking about online advertising, online marketing, which is often a big part of e-commerce or direct-to-consumer, then we see that the costs to acquire a customer online over the last years increased and increased and increased through all channels, all platforms, no matter if it's Facebook, Google, Amazon, and whatnot. And these are usually the three that basically have the lion's share of the whole advertising and marketing space online. These companies are kind of the gatekeepers here, and therefore it's super important to keep the customer acquisition costs on the one hand as low as possible, or to kind of deal with the increasing costs here on the one hand, but there's nothing really that you can do. So you maybe have to focus more on the question, okay, how can you create more value to your customer and therefore increase the customer lifetime value? And that's also where the big difference comes in between funded companies and bootstrapped companies, because again, a funded company that has maybe millions available, they can buy or can acquire new customers on a loss for some time, as long as they are funded. But sooner or later, that bubble is going to burst, and compared to an existing or profitable bootstrapped retail company with maybe an already existing customer base as a way better starting point, might already be profitable, has maybe already a list of customers where they can start from, and therefore have way lower customer acquisition costs than maybe a startup or an e-commerce brand or direct-to-consumer brand that basically starts from zero and therefore has to pay a lot of money to acquire a new customer that has never heard before or never heard of that company before. And I want to show you a very short clip that, as far as I can tell, kind of really gets to the point what I'm trying to say here.
You can no longer acquire at a certain point profitably in Google, Facebook, and Amazon, right? Your LTVs will get out of whack, right? Your gross margin positivity, all of a sudden to gross margin negativity. I mean, forget about net profitability. These are fundamentally broken business concepts. They don't work. They only work if the money never stops. But the money never stops until as much time as people can raise new funds. And that's predicated on people marking up old deals. You see how this whole thing, like at no point is there anything that comes back to you, the entrepreneur, that says, what's your true core product market fit and is it working? It's not part of the conversation.
Yeah, so let's talk about solutions. We don't want to only talk about problems. One problem is for sure, if you don't really have product market fit, then you have to kind of force your product down the throat of your customers, and that's expensive. So possible solutions. Generally speaking, I think a strong brand can reduce your customer acquisition costs, as you can see on the image here. If your customers are willing to literally camp in front of your stores overnight to wait to buy your product and to be one of the first ones that are able to buy your product, I think that's a very luxurious position to be in. And therefore, again, I think when you are already an established brand, maybe you are already an existing retailer, then you can often feed off that brand recognition that you already have, and therefore have way lower customer acquisition costs, for example, online. Meaning, if you're already selling your products in a physical store and your customers already know you there, it's much more likely that they then also have a look at your website or your online store and buy your products or order your products there. Besides, branding and marketing, or focus on branding, which also is a long-term game and therefore not often not affordable for small or fast-growing startups because, again, they have to produce results very quickly. The second big area where I think businesses can or will improve, or at least, not at least, but one of the areas where businesses have the opportunity to differentiate from each other and maybe get an edge over a competitor is what I want to call smart logistics and automation, meaning about the supply chain problems that we're having globally right now. And just on a general note, I think the more you or your company is able to get an advantage here by using the data that you have in a smarter way, or start collecting data and therefore make smarter business and logistic decisions, and automate as much as possible as it makes sense, to save costs, meaning to try to be as flexible as possible, keep your costs low, keep your fixed costs low as possible, and your variable costs maybe a little higher, so that you can react very flexible on changing demand cycles. So I think that's definitely an area, on a general note, where everybody, especially when you are in retail, in e-commerce and selling direct to consumer, need to think about, okay, how do you take control of your whole supply chain, so that you're not dependent on other parties or maybe events that you can't control. So smart logistics and automation in general. And then, of course, especially when you are in the Caribbean, everything around online payments. I think that's still a big bottleneck for multiple reasons that I don't want to talk about today, or don't have the time to talk about today. But I think, we see more and more local solutions available in the Caribbean, so that you are able to accept payments online. And therefore that, of course, offers you a cash flow advantage over your competitor, meaning you have just the funds way faster available. You have it quickly in your bank account. Cash flow increases on the one hand, and then on the other hand, of course, you have the whole security aspect. You have to handle less cash, and so on. You have everything documented, you have everything digital, you don't have paperwork and whatnot. You have everything set up immediately for your tax consultant and advisor and whatnot. So everything, all the second and third order effects here, I think can't be underestimated. So I think on a general note, whenever you talk about direct to consumer or e-commerce, especially in the Caribbean, you need to talk about online payments, or to enable your customer to pay directly online with their credit card, debit card, whatever it might be. So let's talk a little bit about strategy. What can be strategies to avoid some of these traps, or some of these biggest mistakes that we have seen, that even some of the biggest direct-to-consumer companies made in the past. And remember, they have millions in funding. They have presumably the best consultants, the smartest heads in their teams, and for some reason, again, a lot of them still fail. So let's have a look at how can we avoid that. So I think it's a good idea to have a look at one of the biggest e-commerce companies in the world, maybe the first direct-to-consumer and e-commerce company in general. And of course, that's Amazon. So let me pick it up a little. Here we go. So for example, even Amazon, who started out as an online book retailer, basically, isn't a pure retailer, pure online store or e-commerce website anymore. Of course, that's still a big, or the biggest part of their business, but now they diversified, and a lot of their businesses integrates very smoothly and supports each other. For example, the whole marketplace environment that they built and integrated in their e-commerce environment. Then, of course, AWS with the whole cloud, and Amazon Web Services with their subscription services, with Audible, and so on. And now they even start setting up physical stores and going more into that direction. So I just want to show you with that example that, again, there is almost no pure e-commerce or direct-to-consumer company that I'm aware of that only has that one sales channel where they only sell through their online store or through their website. It always has to be kind of integrated in a more overall strategy of the overall business or company. I think, Tesla as an example is maybe overused because none of us is Elon Musk or has access to the funding and whatnot that he has. But nonetheless, I think it's a good example how we might need to rethink or think different about a lot of stuff than we did in the past. Because I think although most people are aware of Tesla for the car itself and what it can do and all the implications that come with changing mobility on the one hand, what I found always interesting, especially as a German and the biggest part of our economy is the car industry, directly or indirectly. And therefore, I found it always interesting to see the business side of the car business that Elon Musk was changing or is changing here, because as you might know, usually when you buy a car, you go into a car salesmanship or car dealership, and they are selling as a third party, basically, usually a specific brand, or they are contractors and only selling Audi, Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, whatever it might be. And that's basically the business model or the sales model of car companies over the last decades. And Tesla kind of flipped that script and said, why not selling cars online, setting up an online store, let them configure everything. Then we don't need that middleman. We don't need to pay the salespeople commissions. We don't need to set up expensive dealership structures and so on. We sell directly to our customers. And kind of then later on added these kind of stores that you can see now, where you have really these physical stores, which in my opinion serve more marketing purpose than actual point of sale. But nonetheless, I think what you also can see here, if all these parts work together, I think although Tesla, of course, is spending money on marketing, they pride themselves that they never spend any any money on advertising, and just being a good product or having a smart marketing strategy, they are in the news and all the time getting free press and free media. So just to keep in mind, maybe Tesla has the best of both worlds, selling online and selling directly through a physical store. So if you think that's not possible in your industry, think twice, because I think if a very old and very conservative industry like the car industry can be changed, then your industry might also be able to adapt. So what is the conclusion? Again, I think the big question, and from my experience when I work with companies, is are we talking about an existing retailer, or are we talking about a direct-to-consumer startup? Because these are, at least in my experience, often completely different starting positions. I think we have to differentiate here. Because often when we talk about a startup, or especially a venture capital funded company, then the goal is not necessarily to be profitable or to have good product market fit, but to hit growth numbers and therefore justify the next funding round or go for the exit that's usually the goal, at least from the investors or the venture capital firms that is behind these companies. And then you are forced to maybe make decisions that are not in the long-term interest of the company. Or are we talking about an already existing retail company, maybe a family business, a classic retail company? Maybe you have your own store, you're already selling direct to the consumer in a classical retail environment. Maybe you're selling through marketplaces, third-party vendors, whatever it might be. But you are already an existing brand, you already have an existing customer base, you already have an existing revenue base, and then you use direct to consumer or e-commerce as an additional sales or marketing channel, or you try to integrate that in your existing strategy and grow that organically on a healthy basis, on a healthy pace. And that's usually, in my experience, what is working, meaning as a complementary part in an already existing business, we already have established product market fit, and now we maybe want to add additional options for the customers. Maybe you want to improve the customer experience. Maybe you want to save costs, automate more, whatever the goal in that specific case might be. But again, we have two different starting points here. On the one hand, we have two different goals here. Let me rephrase that. On the one hand, we want to hit growth numbers and aim for an exit. That's often when we talk about funded or venture capital funded startups. Or are we talking about an already existing retail company that wants to grow, expand, and add direct to consumer or e-commerce as an additional sales and marketing channel? And as I mentioned now a few times, the question is, do you actually have product market fit? Because if you don't have that, then it becomes very expensive and can take a long time, and you might run out of money or runway till you actually find it. And that, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why a lot of these companies that I showed you in the beginning as examples failed in the past, because they never really achieved product market fit. They just threw more money on the marketing and advertising and paid more and more money to acquire a customer, and therefore are losing money with every customer they acquire or with every sale they make. And every normal entrepreneur or every normal business person wouldn't do that because they would see that's just bad business practice. So I think e-commerce, direct to consumer, is, as we can see, not the holy grail. I think everybody has to have a strategy in place, and the strategy is vital to actually become profitable. Because of course, at the beginning, you might get over some hurdles, fix some problems, establish yourself, and find the right flow. But at some point in time, you have to become profitable. And if you're always bleeding money or need funding or need external capital to actually survive or to stay afloat, I think, then that's a clear sign that something is going wrong, and you might want to rethink your overall business model or strategy. All right, that being said, I hope that was helpful so far, and I hope you have maybe one or two ideas out of this talk, and maybe look a little different on e-commerce or direct to consumer in general. Again, I think it's something that I would definitely recommend if you already have an existing customer base, if you already have an existing brand, if you already have an existing revenue base, and say, okay, I want to expand here and want to improve the business with that channel. But I haven't really seen a pure direct to consumer business, a pure e-commerce company that starts from zero and has only their online sales channels. I never really have seen a company that is profitable, not that they don't make sales or don't have revenue, but that is actually profitable and healthy. All right, thanks for joining me today. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to leave them in the comment section, in the chat. If you, followed me so far, leave a like. That other people know what you think. And of course, if you haven't done so as yet, make sure subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if we are not connected on LinkedIn, feel free to do so. That being said, thanks for joining me today, and till next time. Bye-bye.